Hey guys, so for today's video I thought I would do something a little bit different. Hopefully you guys will find these interesting. If you are a CNA or a nurse or another person who has worked in the healthcare field, you know that sometimes weird stuff happens, and these are like ghost stories or creepy stories that I found on this blog post. Um, so it's 8 different stories, and I'm just going to read each one, and hopefully you guys find them interesting. I've definitely had weird things happen to me, especially since I've worked night shift. Numerous facilities I've worked night shift at, and we have had weird things happen, like call lights going on in rooms where nobody is there anymore, or the resident or patient recently died. And it's things like that. I can go more into that on a separate video if you guys are more interested in hearing like my own personal like creepy stories, but these are other people's experiences. So I'm going to read each one and hopefully you guys find them entertaining. So this first one is titled The Man with the Striped Shirt. A fellow nurse and I were talking about patients' hallucinations when he told me about this time he was walking past a patient's room who was an elderly woman with dementia, and she was chatting up a storm with someone. He asked her who she was talking to, and the woman replied, "That nice man in the black and white striped shirt." A while later, he went into another dementia patient's room, and that different patient asked where the man with the striped shirt had gone. This one is called The Patient. A good friend of mine, while doing his rounds as a young intern, he is now a neurosurgeon, had just looked in on a dying patient. After making the patient comfortable, he exited the room and sat on a nearby chair to write his report. After a few minutes, he looked up and saw this patient walking down the hallway. He called to the woman, but there was no response. As he stood up to walk after her, she disappeared. He quickly walked toward the patient's room and saw a light under the door. When he opened the door, it was completely dark in the room. So he turned on the nightlight, went over to the patient, and felt for a pulse. She had died. This next one is called You Brought Your Kitty With You. I had a patient who was CMO and quite obviously very close to dying. The week before, my best buddy cat Pippin had died, and I was pretty broken up about it still. That being said, I walked into her room and she said, "Oh, you brought your kitty with you." I blinked at her and said, "What?" Mind you, this was the first time I'd had that patient, and I had never discussed my cat with her, having cats, or even liking them. Her reply was, "Your kitty, it's right by your foot." I got that momentary shiver in my soul and asked, just for kicks, "Yeah? What color is the kitty?" She says, "Black with some white." My Pippin was a black tuxedo cat with white paws and a white bib. That patient died that night. This next story is called Don't Let Them Take Me. The best I have heard is from a nurse who said that one night she was floated to oncology at the hospital she used to work at. She was given a patient who was passing away and had been unconscious for several days. At one point during the night, the nurse went into the room. The patient was at the top of the bed, looked at her, and said, "Don't let them take me." The nurse was freaked out and asked her who was going to take her, and she said, "That black thing up there," and pointed up towards the ceiling. This patient died within minutes. This next one is called The Lonely Ghost. Not a spooky story, but a lonely ghost. One of the rooms, if it was being used regularly, fine, no problems. But since it was a room at the end of the hall, it was often used for storage. If a couple of weeks went by and there were no patients or activity in the room, the call light would start going off 4 to 5 times per shift. But if you went into the room and turned on the TV, the call light wouldn't go off anymore. So needless to say, when the room was being used for storage, the TV was always on with the volume down low. This next story is called Pointing Right Over My Shoulder. Every night before the next shift comes in, I check on all my patients, make sure their briefs are clean, refill water pitchers, etc. This is usually right after sunset. 3 different patients in 3 different rooms have told me they're frightened of the tall, thin man standing in the corner, pointing right over my shoulder. It's truly unsettling. This next story is called Last Call. I work as a CNA in long term care. We had one resident, Betty, who was totally independent. All ADLs were done on her own, and she did fine on her own, never had an incident. The only time that she wanted help was showers, and then she only wanted you around to make sure she didn't slip and fall. Betty came down with pneumonia and had to be hospitalized. When she came back, she was too weak to do things on her own, but too stubborn to ask for help. The last thing the CNA told her before going to bed was, "If you want to get up, hit your call light. I'll come help you." Of course, she didn't, got rid of the bed alarm, climbed out of bed, and fell. Betty died from the fall. No one has been moved into her bed. The following week, the call light for the room went off at night. Thinking it was the resident in bed B, I walked down to the room to see what she wanted. I walked into the room only to see the call light for bed A and B off. The call light for bed C, which was Betty's unoccupied bed, was on. My eyes filled up with tears. I backed out of the room and made someone else go turn the call light off. This next story is called Just Wait, I'm Coming. Some of the women in my family have what my great-grandmother called ghost-seeing eyes. That is, they see people and things that the rest of us can't or won't see, things like the dead. I don't know if my grandmother gained ghost-seeing eyes at the end of her life, but it's hard to deny that she saw something, either mental or spectral in origin, that comforted her as she neared death. We should all be so lucky. At the end of her life, my grandmother was confined to a bed in the hospice unit of a Hong Kong hospital. In the end stages of what her doctors called senile dementia, hospital nurses and my aunt, who was also a nurse, were always with her. Apparently, nurses weren't the only ones at her side. Though her mind was betraying her, a fog seemed to lift in her final days. As told by her nurses, her eyes started following something or someone around the room. Something or someone nobody else could see. It would have been easy to write off her behavior as simply the progression of her disease, but the nurses remarked that there was a focus, a single-mindedness to her gaze, to her watching. And then she started talking. "Father is here to help me," she'd say as her eyes looked up at the empty space next to her bed. Father, referring to her late husband, my grandfather. "Yes, I don't know, you do look well." She'd converse with Father, almost girlish at times, her eyes unwavering. Like a last gift, my grandmother brightened up again with her late husband's company. He was her constant companion, and the nurses took to giving them their privacy. "Yes, we'll telephone her when it's time. We will. We will." A nurse remembered my grandmother saying this to Father. Was she talking about the 2 a.m. call my mom got when my grandmother died? Was she talking about the dream my mother had before my grandmother's death? Hallucination or not, the Chinese nurses were not about to interfere with what just might be a husband ushering his wife to the other side. "Father is waiting for me," she'd say, her eyes trained on the foot of her bed. Just wait, I'm coming." I don't know the full details of my grandmother's passing, but from what I understand, she did not feel afraid, did not feel alone. It seems her partner in life, my grandfather, was also her partner in death. So that was the last ghost story or creepy story. Um, like I said, there have been so many weird, strange, creepy things happen when I've been working night shift, especially. I find that things like that happen, and that may just be because it's like much quieter at night, and so you realize like when these weird noises happen much more than you might be able to during the day. But do you believe in ghosts? Do you have an experience of your own that you'd like to share? Um, did you find this interesting? Because there are a lot of different, like, creepy stories or hospital or nursing home ghost stories, and I could definitely, like, share some from time to time that other people have written about if you guys would be interested in hearing them. So let me know. And yeah, I will talk to you guys in tomorrow's video.